A few weeks ago, I went down to Philadelphia for the annual CCAR, Central Conference of American Rabbis Convention. And don't let the name fool you, there were more than 500 Reform rabbis from across the world there, including a mighty delegation from Canada and quite a few from Israel. And we were there to learn, to share resources, to address the great issues facing our people today, and of course, to reconnect with friends and colleagues. And Rabbi Erica Ash is the current president of the CCAR, and she had perhaps the most non-enviable task I've ever seen, which is to give a Devar Torah in front of a room of roughly 500 rabbis. And I have to tell you, she was incredible. She was preaching on Parshat Pikudei, and she said, this includes the descriptions of and the instructions for the making of the priestly garments, the beautiful multicolored robes and drapings that are crimson and sapphire, and the beaten metal accoutrements and silver and gold, the precious stones, which the Kohen Gadol, the grand priest, the high priest, wears. But more than garb the man, she explained, it actually minimizes the person while enhancing the station. The human being, the priest, is subsumed, one could even say consumed, by the stately garments. And I want you to think back to last year's coronation of King Charles, and the moment when the royal vestments were placed upon him, the orb and the rod and the crown. Or when you see the Catholic Pope addressing the faithful in a golden robe or even a simple white frock. Or, more locally, when the Speaker of the House of Commons, in his official garb of black robe and stark wig, addresses and stands the government. These iconic modes of dress remind us that the person is just filling a role, and they are very much secondary to the role itself. The garb is what lets us know that this human being will come and go. And that's the way it is with the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Aaron, his sons, all of his descendants, they will wear it, they will walk into this role, and they will leave this role. But the vestments are forever. And the role of the Kohen is supposed to endure as long as there is sacrificial service. And in fact, Rabbi Ash continued, that the fact is that this role is so important that sometimes the man wearing the robe vanishes entirely, which is what happens in this week's Torah portion. In our portion this week, Parshat Shmini, Aaron has two sons, and their names are Nadav and Avihu. And they make a mistake. They bring alien fire before God, and instantly they are consumed, and they die on the spot. And the response of Moses and God is to demand that Aaron and his remaining living sons just keep going, to continue their service, their work without a moment's interruption. They are to be silent. They are not to mourn. They are not to tear their garments. They are not to display any sign of loss. Because the Kohen must serve in perfect purity. The Kohen cannot show fault or flaw. The man who fills that role for the good of his community must sometimes vanish beneath the garb. And here is where Rabbi Ash showed off her mastery of the text and as her skill in leading a conference of rabbis. And that she reminded us that we, those 500 rabbis gathered in that room, are not Kohanim. We are not priests. For while the Kohen's job above all was to provide a method of worship, and I know this is a bit ironic as I'm standing here at our Friday night tefillah, the role of the rabbi is not to be a person who leads prayer. The role of the rabbi above everything else is to be a teacher. And a good teacher does not vanish into their role, nor into their syllabus. They lift their material, they create relationships, and they give their community the gift of education in senseless times. I am heartbroken this week. And if I were a Kohen, I would never and could never share that with you. But because I am a rabbi, I have to. The killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza, working for World Central Kitchen in an IDF strike which misidentified them as Hamas operatives, has gripped my heart, and it does not let it go. World Central Kitchen is an NGO that was amongst the first to fly to Israel, to feed the displaced Israelis who fled their homes after October 7th. And now they are also feeding people in Gaza. It is run and organized by Chef Jose Andres, who has been and continues to be an ardent supporter of Israel. And in his widely shared lament, he stated, "Israel is better than the way this war is being waged." And he also said, in the worst conditions, after the worst terrorist attack in its history, it is now time for the best of Israel to show up. And his words level a charge, and they strike in a way that the angry howl of a mob or the double standard hypocrisy of a government never does. We failed a friend, and he is rightfully furious. People who relied on him were killed, and our friend is grieving. And like visitors to a Shiva home where tragedy has struck, even the most heartfelt word of consolation can be hard to find. Today, a probe found answers and removed officers and assigned blame, but it does not soothe. And immediately after this attack, the IDF accepted responsibility and admitted its liability, but it does not fix what happened. And we can and do hold ourselves to a higher standard than any other nation that is fighting for its life. But we are still ashamed when we fall below our own threshold. Grief and loss are not things which are cleanly solved. Heartbreak is not easily dismissed. And in this moment, actually, it would be nice to be a Kohen. It would be nice to be like Aaron, who in the face of all-consuming, mind-numbing grief is given permission, is given license to simply lose himself into his role. I have never read this parsha as a kindness before, an ordained escape that allows a person to put on their garb and put their personhood away. But I see the appeal this week. I see the appeal of surety and confidence in a moment of turbulence and loss. Lift the knife, light the fire, fan the smoke, and do not spend time in memory or tears or guilt or blame. To be in the cleanliness of a role instead of the messiness of a human being. It would certainly be much easier. But that has not been our way. It is not our way, and has not been for millennia. For 2 millennia, the Jewish people have always chosen to be heartbroken over being heartless. Since the destruction of the temple, the gates of prayer are locked, says the Talmud. Oh, those gates are locked, all of them, except for the gate of tears. Admitting pain, wrestling with a broken heart, is not a weakness in our tradition. It is not a sign of doubt. It is not a failing or a lapse of faith. To have a broken heart is a holy thing. As the Kotzker Rebbe teaches us, nothing is fuller than a broken heart. We have a unique gift as the Jewish people, in that we do not need to lose ourselves into a mask of certainty. We do not need to bury our pain beneath a garb greater than ourselves. As Jews, we are allowed to be disappointed. We are allowed to reflect and to admit where mistakes have been made without losing everything, without losing who we are. And we can acknowledge that we are not perfect. And we can acknowledge that Israel is not perfect. And we can acknowledge that this war has had unintended consequences without forfeiting the need to fight it or forfeiting the right of the state of Israel to exist. My heart breaks for those 7 good souls, for their families and those who love them. My heart is broken for their chef, who is still a friend of Israel, and for his loss. And my heart is also broken for our hostages, who are held now for 6 months as of this Sunday, for their families and for their loved ones, and for the empty seats that are set for them. And my heart is broken for every generation in our community, from the very youngest, who has yet to learn our history, to the most senior, that fears seeing history repeat. My heart is broken for every Jew waking up scared, uncertain, and adrift. Yes, I am heartbroken this week. But unlike Aaron, for the good of our community, neither I nor you need to vanish it away. In fact, thank God, to be your rabbi, I cannot vanish it away. Karov Adonai l'nishberi lev. The psalmist tells us that God is so close to the brokenhearted. This Shabbat, as always, may that be our truth. But more than our truth, may it be the comfort and the permission that we need to see another week. Shabbat Shalom.